Circumcision is rape. We are pulling an infant by choice, pinning him down, and removing an essential part of his sexuality. What circumcision does is it terrifies him on a subconscious and conscious level to his ability to feel safe, to feel that he can trust his mom, feel that he can trust women. We have all been brainwashed to believe is for the benefit, and we should not talk about it, or else you will be ostracized from society.
I've also heard you talk about the greater implications of circumcision, socially, financially.
It is a $6 billion industry because of the fibroblasts inside of the foreskin. The beauty industry is one of the biggest buyers of foreskin. Oprah has a specific cream that has fibroblasts from babies from Korea.
The doors are open to my 2026 live Audacious Embodiment event in Miami, May 15th through 17th. And I'm calling all of my ladies who are ready to stop pretending, performing, curating, and managing a rigid identity. This weekend, we will be focusing on 4 Ps because I love alliteration. Pattern disrupt. We are going to lay fresh snow on your mountain so that you can ski new tracks, because experiences that take you out of your routine and stimulate all of the right conditions allow you to shift your identity even after one weekend. The next P is permission field, because when you know what's possible, when you are modeled and templated a new breadth of experience for yourself as a woman, you get to be more of yourself. And here's the thing. When you're attending a retreat or a training, you need to choose a space holder who has owned more of his or her shit than you have, because they can expand that permission field for you. And if you ask any of my friends or my family, they will tell you that I have done my share of pivots and am pretty practiced at being bad and wrong, so that I can facilitate this expansion of your permission field in the space of just a few days, maybe even just a few minutes. The next P is pleasure, because it deserves to sit in the proper place in the hierarchy of your priorities as an everyday experience. I also am very focused on creating the conditions for the pleasure that we experience as women together. It is so healing and so powerful. The last P is polarity, because your girl just came off of a David Data teacher training. I have many nuggets to share, and I have a very particular perspective on what it is to be a woman in her feminine power. And no, it is not rose petal baths and rage catharsis in groups on retreat. Okay. The second edition of Audacious Embodiment Live will feature more practice time with yours truly by request of the previous audience members. And also, of course, daily dance, sensual movement, and transformational practices that will expand your experience of your own body as a woman and create the conditions for more aliveness in your daily life. And a total rebrand on who you get to be as a woman in this world. I cannot wait to squeeze you in Miami this May. The link is in show notes and also at kellybroganmd.com/AE. Hi, and welcome back to Reclamation Radio. I am Dr. Kelly Brogan, and today I make the second effort of my career to explore the ritual of circumcision. And I say the second because the first time that I showcased an interview on this subject, it ended up being so dark that it's probably one of the only, if not the only time I did not even publish the interview. This was before I had a podcast. It was a long time ago because I've been very passionate about the subject for a long time. This conversation, I think you'll find, is a pretty powerful balance between just the objective reality of circumcision, what it is, what is actually going on in this country and in other cultural and religious settings, why people are doing this to infant boys and even young and adolescent boys, sometimes even adult men, and what the ramifications are, both for that man, for his partner, for society, for the economy, and for the collective dynamics between men and women, mothers and sons, fathers and sons? And most importantly, what can be done for a man who begins to sensitize himself, no pun intended, to these implications and what that reclamation process and journey can possibly look like? I also call women to the carpet to begin to take responsibility for the role that we play in allowing access to our infants for medical and religious abuse. So we'll end on a hopeful note and just lightly traffic through the necessary spaces of awareness generating when it comes to this highly normalized and often overlooked driver of so much struggle and suffering for us today. Welcome, Jenna, to the show.
Thank you, Kelly, so much for having me. I'm just honored, truly.
I want to set a bit of context for the harrowing spaces that we will be exploring together in this conversation and to frame my intention for what it is that we're going to be delving into. Because my journey, as you know, I believe, and many listening know, toward ending the war with men has been long and arduous, right? And I sometimes reflect that one of the reasons that I even became a doctor, let alone an overachiever and professional, credentialed, intellectual, whatever, was so that I could fight the archetypal bad daddy, right? And I actually see this in a lot of female activists. And as I have worked to integrate that like negative animus, what has followed in its wake? Compassion, right? So, you and I are very dedicated to resolving victim consciousness, if I could be so presumptuous, right? And the blaming and the finger pointing and the sort of like patriarchal rallying cry is not what we're here to discuss or explore. And even though I was, a card carrying feminist in my maturational process, I have come to deeply appreciate the plight of men as contrasted, by the plight of women, which I'm extremely intimately familiar with, right? And as I've softened around that with curiosity, I've also come to see the role that women specifically play in generating the results that we don't favor, right? So if we look at a landscape of men who have been systematically emasculated, and we lament their lack of leadership in the world, their lack of integrity, the absence of honor, we feel burdened, being the father and the mother in our households. What can we do about it, right? So I've identified a couple of places where women have a lot of leverage, right? Including in the courtship realm. So I've become very much interested in the gatekeeping of sexual access. I never thought in a million years I would be a proponent of, waiting for whatever you deem to be commitment. Of course, this is if you're interested in pair bonding, right? And marriage, right? So you are responsible for your sexual access. Okay. I've become interested in the role that women can play in the marital arena to transform the marriage itself without couples therapy, without the man involved. And I've also become interested in something I have no practice with because I have 2 daughters, which is how we raise our sons, right? Especially when we have not necessarily done the work of integrating that negative animus, right? Like what happens subconsciously? How do we tell those young boys to behave and comply and regulate our emotions and then end up raising lambs instead of wolves, right? So I would really like to talk today about the role that women play, and obviously specifically mothers, but also women like you and me having a conversation about this, the role that women play in perpetuating ritual circumcision and the role that that plays in the emasculation of men, physically, spiritually, from the meta to the 3-dimensional level. And I think that the moment we can share in shining a light on this can serve to either like induce a lot of disgust and cognitive dissonance, which I've like been through these stages because we'll talk about it, but I've participated in performing circumcisions as a medical student in training. And I'm not sure that outside of like the facts, that's really super helpful, right? Because it's one of the most, like when you zoom out, when you wake up from the anesthesia, I don't need to tell you, it's one of the most like heinous practices. I don't know how else to phrase it, that we engage in a totally normalized, way that spans the religious to the allopathic. We'll get into that. So rather than like really juicing that lemon, I want to just be as factual and stark as possible around the role that women play in facilitating the surrender of our infants to this ritual, perhaps because we've never been exposed to a conversation like this. And also in failing to appreciate the profound nature of the impact of this ritual in the adult men that we interact with. So I'd love to start with that little diatribe complete. I'd love to start, Jenna, with sort of the context for your interest in this. Because when I learned about your specialty, I immediately invited you on the show because there aren't many women speaking out about this. Obviously, there are some resources that have started to accumulate. And I know that we share so many beliefs and values that the place that you come from in sounding the alarm about this, I know is one of sovereignty and personal responsibility. And so I'd love to just give a bit of context around how it is that you became interested in this before we start to talk, the facts about what's actually going on with circumcision, particularly in this country.
Yeah. Thank you for everything that you said, and your experience and adding into what I'm doing is going to really shape a bigger understanding of not only the physical, but the spiritual, the brainwashing, the satanic infiltration, these huge egregores of this religion, sex, taboos, all of it. Even that within itself is a big preventative for most women to even look into, right? If they don't have the ability in their body to access or feel into some of these things, like it's just like the lights are basically gonna be off. It's gonna be hard for them to really, really pick up on it. So I'm just a really curious woman. I'm extremely curious, and I'm really passionate about helping men relieve themselves of trauma, specifically the trauma of circumcision. And my vision for them is to restore themselves into the divine masculinity so that they can deeply connect with themselves. They can connect with women, and they can rise to the level that humanity needs them, because they are equally a part of creating a beautiful new earth for us all. And there has been this huge diminishment that every day for me, I'm still noticing as I'm dissolving my own trauma, my own perspective on life in relationship to the divine masculine and the divine feminine. To kind of just really cut to the chase, because I know we really want to get to it. I went through a really big healing in 2020. I healed from chronic asthma. And during this time, I started to go into the closets, essentially, that I never wanted to look at. And it had to do with my feminine processes. It had to do with the fact that I hated my bleed. Why was I ashamed? Why didn't I want children? Why am I hiding my tampons from my husband? And why am I allowing, or why have I allowed men to see me in ways that I can't see me? And this just exploded, like just the cap flew off. And I started to access an authority, and my external experience in life just shifted. And how it was 2020, right? We're experiencing this gag order right when I am literally symbolically and holistically removing mine and being able to breathe and take up space. And through this authority and through to actually loving my yoni, looking at her, honoring her, taking more time and self-pleasure, and also creating my own, from asthma, right? You have to get rid of chemicals, perfumes, detergents. So I started making my things at home. And one day I just had a download. It said, hey, make a yoni oil for women and teach them alchemical practices and how that they can start to gain access to the things that you've been gaining access to. So I ended up going into this really beautiful, new evolutional period where I was deeply connecting with self, having more profound conversations with women, noticing similarities, and then also educating them and helping them through this really beautiful brand that I had created named Elure. And I thought that was it, Kelly. Like, I thought, you found it. I was a yoga teacher before. You're going to help women. You're going to be in the sex realm. I was so excited. So excited. I've always loved sex. I've always loved to talk about sex. I've always had a dirty mind and laughed at dirty jokes. I've always just like really loved that type of humor. And this was, 2 years ago, October 26th in 2023. I woke up in the middle of the night from the worst dream of my life, where I was a witness to a newborn baby boy being circumcised in a medical setting. The dream was so revolting, devastating. The visceral response of my body, that it was like about 3:30 in the morning, was squirmy. I didn't know how to, I was gasping for air and incredibly uncomfortable, to the point where I was flooded with a fear so deep, I began to plead with God, please don't ever let me come back as a baby boy. Please don't ever let me come back as a baby boy. And because I knew easily that could have been me, had there been a switch of a chromosome. And fell back asleep, woke up the next morning and collapsed in my ex-husband's arms, crying hysterically. And it took about a week before I could actually share the dream with somebody else who would even listen to me without hysterically crying. In the dream, there was an energy exchange between me and this boy, this baby. And he turned his head right after they had ripped the foreskin off of his penis, off of the glands, stared into my eyes, and we had a telepathic exchange where he said, you need to do something. You need to see this and be with it. And when I look back, I am just so honored that that little boy came to me and that I was chosen. I've known what honor is in my life. I've known how it feels, to have that profound level of, that feeling, that yumminess. But I've never understood what honor is to this day, until now, until doing this work, into showing up for men who have been silenced all their lives, into talking about something that so many people are deeply afraid of, and to rise as this mother energy that I have within me to do it, make something change, to make a shift ultimately. And I just kind of went through this crazy evolutionary dark night of the soul, getting there. But to answer your question, simply, I had a dream.
It's amazing to even hear you in the retelling now, to very clearly feel the intensity of that kind of an interaction, and to contrast that with my experience as a 20-something year old, and how absent really that sentience was, right? So part of my own spiritual journey has been to take with me the past iterations, because it's very tempting to be oh, wow, I was real fucked up then when I was a card carrying cult member. And now I'm so great, and the shadow of that has really compelled me to resolve superiority of my current self and potential future selves relative to my, past and all of my associated trespasses. But because I was so shut down, and my body was not a safe vessel for my feminine energy and my heart energy. I mean, I didn't want kids. I didn't used to like animals. I was being ritually traumatized by the hierarchical model that is medical training, that is just like the military. Ask any doctor. And so I remember in one particular instance, I mean, you've talked about this, but, and you know that these kinds of rituals, this specific ritual is performed in back rooms, right? So sound isolated back rooms. That's totally accurate. There's a special room with multiple doors and you go back in. And as a med student, at least, back in the day, I was a part of the procedures, right? And I remember feeling like a squeamishness, like this is gross, but I don't honestly remember feeling in any limbic region, let alone my heart, that this is wrong. Right? And that sensitivity, that reclamation of my feminine morality, right? Of my heart wisdom, of my empathic bond to all that is, right? Has been quite a journey. And so if I, as a mom, right, can look back on that version of myself and see how deeply brainwashed and conditioned I was, it's not very surprising to me to recognize how successful the program has been at normalizing this, right? I don't know how many men, let alone their women, would even consider this a problem, right? They're like, it's just how it is. Or it was, it was back when babies don't really feel, that much pain. So it's better to do it then versus later. All of these tropes, right? So part of what I can see you were inspired to begin to kindle is this sentient availability to really just feel for a minute what the fuck we're doing. Okay. So I want to zoom out a bit and just talk about the state of circumcision today. Now, I'm sure you know about like worldwide incidents and stats and practices. We can also talk about that. But I also, in this first world country, what we're up to here in a very kind of like de rigueur way, whether it's in the medical ritualized setting or a religious setting, it's quite prevalent. I mean, I've heard stats of like 80% prevalence. I don't know if that's, what you've encountered in terms of American circumcision. But I want to talk just about the landscape, right? So what is actually happening? How is this happening when new parents are welcoming their baby boys into the world? What kinds of decisions are they making, or they're just on autopilot, right? And they're not even actively making decision, so that people can appreciate kind of where we're starting from.
Yeah. There's so many different ways that I can go about answering this question. I can talk about him. I can talk about her. We can just talk about it all. We have been conditioned that birth is a medicalized event. And from my perspective, from a woman that was very closed off to her sexuality, who didn't want children, who hated her bleed, who would have preferred to have been a man, who is fearful of the pain, brainwashing, right? We see it in movies. We see it everywhere. Eve caused this, right? Because she ate the apple. Now we have to experience all this pain like forever. And when you have a woman that clogged with trauma, with shame, with repression, with disembodiment, with not really even have another woman in their life to celebrate and support the menarch, to really help them evolve into what is it being a woman and how can we access our power. And so it starts really young. And I personally believe that up until a woman is truly doing a lot of her womb healing and reclaiming her sexuality and reclaiming her life and taking the reins, it becomes really difficult because she's going to want the easy escape. She's going to want the drugs. And she has a husband. She's a people pleaser. She's been given a gag order all her life. And majority of the time, it's the husband who is cut, who wants to have his son look like him. And I've heard of women share, my husband, like one woman said that my husband wanted to sue me because I didn't want to circumcise my son. And they will get into really huge fights. And then they just give their power over, because everything in a checked in, a dialed in woman in her body from a cellular level knows how profoundly wrong this ritual is. And, what's actually really even crazy to add on to this is I have a friend, and she has a full spectrum birth facility, and with home birth and free birthing and everything. And she has women that will have a beautiful home birth. They will have dim lights. They will have all the music and everything. It will be a very calm setting. 2-3 days later, they'll go and circumcise. So it doesn't necessarily on a certain level, the brainwashing is that deep.
The blind spot is massive.
Because it's just not something that anyone talks about it, because it's highly offensive. So if you can create a technology that becomes so triggering and highly offensive, then you've created a sophisticated piece of technology that's going to prevent people from asking questions, from creating change, from questioning authority, and to actually taking full radical responsibility for their lives. Because if you're going to take full radical responsibility for, oh my God, I could have easily have been duped into cutting my son, what other parts of me do I also have to look into to heal? So it opens the doors to just this huge chunk of having to really do deep inner work. Or let's say you are a mother who has done this and has making the choice. That's a whole nother avenue of deep upsets and a protective preventative that keeps them from wanting to hear and take full accountability for what they've done. I mean, what will happen is they'll turn the energy back at you. And this has happened to me, where a lot of women, they can't go there. So they'll just send a bunch of their projection to me, and I'm in the wrong. And how dare I ever say that they're a bad mother? But when you're looking at circumcision, and although when we have a specific visual of rape, we all know what rape looks like in our mind as soon as I said that word. But circumcision is rape. We are pulling an infant by choice, pinning him down, and removing an essential part of his sexuality, of his body. And if we could allow ourselves to even hear that for a moment and to feel into it, perhaps even using just simple terms like this could also help. But I mean, sex, religion, social conformity, brainwashing, trauma, archetypes, and the type of stuff that the identity that we create within all of those archetypes itself become the mask, and they just cannot see it. And of course, if a male were to actually look into this who has been cut, whoa, I was laid down. My parents chose to have me strapped down to a circumstrand and peel the most sensitive part of my body off of me. What kind of can of worms does that open for him? And does he subscribe to a lot of conditioning and other rituals that are set in place for him during his upbringing and development that are also coming in to interfere with it?
So I want to talk a bit about the unholy alliance between religion and allopathy, the medical system, because it certainly seems to me like these forces are co-legitimizing, right? So one legitimizes the other, which can often lend legitimacy back to the original. And I wonder how you see the why of circumcision, right? So why these parents are making this kind of a choice, again, if they're making it consciously, or why they're just sort of like ushered into this as the next step that occurs after birth for a baby boy. What do you see as the reasons, right? Because certainly as a med student, I was deep in germ theory programming. And so the idea that it was, somehow medically beneficial and hygienic and all of that is, germ theory is at the core of every aspect of allopathic medicine. And once you eliminate that, there's almost nothing left. So I know that is a driver in the seemingly atheistic setting of the cult of allopathy. But when you talk to parents, or when you do research on the driving forces, what is the why these days for different folks about how they would be asleep to zooming out and seeing this more objectively?
And you're talking to me like on a physical level, like actually like, or do you want to go into like the spiritual why?
Oh, that's a great question. I was, more thinking like very literally, like why the hell are people still doing this? How are they justifying it? And I could make my guesses, but I'm sure you have like more educated information. And then I imagine there is, potentially some sort of karmic paying it forward of abuse and unprocessed rage. Yeah, I'd love to hear the full spectrum.
Because they were told. Because someone in an authority in which they haven't specifically like taken their own authority, they're going to have to drag authority from someone else. Authority figures are telling them what to do. Family members are telling them what to do. Religion is telling them what to do. And they're very fearful. So if we were to go from the religious standpoint, you are cleaner, more holy. You're the chosen people. Right? It becomes more of this hierarchical, like level of lifting in society and lifting in your culture, in your religion, or else you will be ostracized. Right?
So like a status.
Exactly. And then you have the medicalized, the allopathic, and it's surgery. It's a little step. It takes 15 minutes, an anesthetic for it. And it'll be done in a whip. He doesn't need it. It's useless. So and then, cosmetic. Then there's the cosmetic portion of this. Well, a foreskin's ugly. It looks so much better. And a foreskin's gross and nasty. There's so much conditioning that I've even seen. Like I remember even on MTV, they would publish different types of episodes where the whole thing would be about how disgusting let's say a boy had a foreskin. And the whole episode was about him going and getting a circumcision because the woman who was about to go down on him made fun of it. So we have like deep conditioning that starts at a very young age. So cosmetics, allopathic deception, religion, and the conformity, the bullying, right? If you don't circumcise your son, he's going to get bullied in the locker, and man, we better prevent that. Because the last thing that we want to do is allow him to get bullied and not utilize our authority and our ability to mentor and coach him through it. Because we deeply feel that we don't have that ability within ourselves, so we can't share that with you, right? So depending on the maturity level of the parents and what they're willing to actually forego to educate and prepare a man to become a young kid, to be prepared to become a man. And then we have the spiritual perspective. And if you can think about the archetypal masculine, the archetypal divine masculine in his sense and his authority to lead, to be the protector, to be the provider. And what circumcision does is it terrifies him on a subconscious and conscious level to where his ability to feel safe, his ability to connect deeply to his heart, to feel that he can trust his mom, feel that he can trust his dad, feel that he can trust women, feel that he can trust life. It's the biggest spiritual wound placed upon him because it's a degradatory type of technology. And you're removing him from his ability to actually understand the mechanics of the mind, to understand like the energetics and the spirituality of the organs, because each of the organs they have polarity, right? We have certain male organs and certain female organs. And then it affects the heart. It affects the prostate. It affects his ability to be holding into his scepter of light and to drive and to create and bring things to life. So essentially, what I see a lot in these boys or these men rather, they have a very difficult time projecting positivity into the future. For example, I'll say, hey, if you had a really high timeline, what would this timeline look like? If you never had this trauma and if you were living without the experiences that you're currently having and they can't They can't do it. So circumcision, whatever happens to the body, it also happens to the mind. So think of the mind as a male genital organ, right? So, and think of ideas and thoughts as sperm, and they're moving out to create immaculate conception, right? For him to actually create thoughts, create the ideas for him to understand his full self-identity. So because the mind is a male genital organ, what happens to the body happens to the mind. Therefore, his mind and his ability to deeply connect to his full self-identity has also been circumcised. So this is creating a man who is ungrounded, a man who doesn't feel like he is enough, a man who is unworthy and has a difficult time projecting and seeing this vision for himself. So if we were to also go into the energy of the heart is female. However, there is a mechanism with the heart. Any part of the body that releases and ejaculates, it's going to be more of a male genital organ. And so what does the heart do? It releases, ejaculates frequency, emotion. So that ability for him to turn love back into himself, that ability for him to connect with another and to have full acceptance has also been circumcised. So we're talking about a multi-dimensional level of effects that circumcision has, and not only the physical aspects of the removal of the foreskin, but what that in turn will do to him on a physical, psychological, and psychic level. So who are these men growing into? Why would they want to keep men degraded? Why would they want to terrify them? Why would they want them to not be able to connect with self, to not be able to connect with women, to not be able to have spiritual authority, to deeply ground into their scepter of light, into their ability to truly initiate and penetrate life, and that ability to share visions and ejaculate their creativity into the womb of the universe has been blocked and circumcised.
Seems like a powerful aspect of the agenda, right? If we are observing masculinized women and emasculated and feminized men, and the neutralization of this sacred polarity, seems like a very important aspect, right? You have talked about, I've heard you speak about the implementation, if that's the right word, of circumcision at different age brackets, right? Like in some religious settings, it's not actually done at birth. And one might imagine that that is like way worse. And I've learned from you about the relative, if we could quantify, right, the relative spectrum of injury for the newborn. However, I wasn't really aware that this is occurring in older age boys in some settings. So I'd love, to share with anybody who isn't aware of the spectrum.
Yes. Thank you for asking that question and including them. They not only are there infants, we've had infants as soon as 6 hours, all the way up to 48 hours, 72 hours if they're in the hospital, 8 days if we are talking about in Judaism for the Brit Milah. And in Islamic cultures, they wait until closer to puberty, sometimes 7 to 10. And their way of going about the ritual is less different. It's looser in the way that they have their family. Each of them has their own way of traditional ritualistic types of, like, we do it like this, we do it like that. In Judaism, it's the structure is there and they do it the same every single time because the brain is in the theta and mostly in the theta brain waves, right? It's from utero all the way until 7. So I usually will categorize the infant circumcision to be worse because of how it is attacking innocence. It is a huge torture to a new, fresh soul, and how that will lodge itself into the subconscious mind and it becomes deep imprints. And these imprints continue to be compounded through life from diaper changes, from doctor checkups, from physical exams, and from car seats. So they are constantly getting these whiplashes of reminders and how they are unsafe. But then if we have a child who is before he's pubescent, imagine your entire life waiting and twiddling your thumbs and worrying about knowing that there's going to be a day in the future that your family is going to essentially hold you down without anesthetic. There are actually some circumcision parlors that exist in these countries where they will have video games for the kids and they get the full amount of anesthetic because infants can't, or else if they got the full dose, they would die. So I had a boy reach out to me recently. I had men reach out to me from all over the world sharing their stories. It's horrible. He wouldn't tell me where he was from. He was terrified. And he said that when he was 10 years old, his father and his uncle held him down against his will and didn't want to have to pay for him to go to a clinic to get anesthetic. And they did it in front of his entire family. So they will eat the foreskin. They will bury it. The parents will put it on their ankles. I've heard some of the most bizarre type of practices that they will do within their own compartment, familial compartment. And then you have boys who have grown up intact and that were misinformed incredibly by their doctors that the foreskin, because that foreskin is actually adhered, and you know this, the foreskin, for everyone who doesn't, is adhered to the glands, the head of the penis. And it is a very slow process to where it will start to be able to retract back. But a lot of these doctors, because it's so dirty and because it's so gross and it can cause infection, it can cause all types of diseases, you need to clean it. And they will tell parents, and they themselves in their offices will forcibly retract the foreskin back, which causes heavily bleeding. Sometimes it will actually cause them to have to go in for a full circumcision because of how much damage that they create. And so the high majority, I don't have the number, but it's up to 90% of phimosis. So phimosis is when the foreskin gets inflamed at the very top. I forgot to just say the ridge of the foreskin at the very top. It will get extremely inflamed and scar. And what happens when they get an erection, the skin will have a difficult time retracting back. And a lot of these kids, whether they're a teenager, whether they're a young adult or a man, when they get phimosis, the first thing that a doctor wants to do is just get a knife and cut it off because you shouldn't even be having it anyway. So they're in all this fear. They feel like, oh my God, I have all the shame, because all the shame that's being thrown at intact men is also another layer to how horrible this is, and the amount of intact men that have contacted me and needed someone to talk to because of the genital shame. And when you can even think about genital shame in general, this is our center of creativity. This is our center of our divine connection of who we are to ourselves, of who we are to God, of who we are with one another in sacred union, in the development of how we want to authentically express who we are. It's why there's just so much technology being thrown at the genitalia and sex. So these men who have phimosis are getting circumcisions because of the fear that the medical cult is creating. And they will get botched. They will have horrible circumcisions. It's incredibly painful, and they are absolutely devastated because later they find out there are more natural and holistic ways to remediate the scar tissuing and the phimosis inflammation that is built through light touch and through exercises, because the foreskin has so many fibroblasts to it. And fibroblasts are I like to call them, I don't know what you call them, but the stem cells to connective tissue. A fibroblast can easily, through the force of the body, through homeostasis, it can turn into skin, it can turn into cartilage, bone, muscle tissue, if I already said that or not, whatever that may be. And so because it has so many fibroblasts, the ability for the foreskin itself to heal is very, very likely. And they say it's almost like, imagine, because There have even been doctors in the AAP who have shared that they think that the foreskin has upward to 80 to 100,000 nerve endings. Usually you will find in books, you'll see about 20,000, but there have been some that have admitted that they think that there are a lot more Meissner's corpuscles, a lot more sensitivity. So they have a huge loss in their sexual experience, their ability to be multi-dimensional in sex, their ability to be more subtle, and the proprioception. So the foreskin actually has proprioception receptors on it, allowing him to actually really know and understand where his cock is inside of the vagina. Noticing, because proprioception is understanding where your body is in space and being able to deeply connect with a woman. In addition to the receptors on the foreskin as well that move up his brainstem all the way to his brain and release neurochemicals that allow him to bond and to fall in love. So we have hijacked the bonding experience, the multi-dimensional sexual experience, his co-creative and creativity center, and the love. Why are so many women complaining and so upset? I cannot get my husband to stay with me, to be grounded with me, to see me. He runs away. He's escaping. As soon as I get close to him, he bails out. You know why? It's because we have a thing going down by the name of circumcision that we have all been brainwashed to believe is for the benefit, and we should not talk about it, or else you will be ostracized from society and you're fucking crazy.
So if you have a parent or an aging loved one who is struggling with balance, joint stiffness, or simply getting around, you may have wondered what you can possibly do to support them. And I believe that I have found the solution for our parents if you are in my generation. So Juvent's micro impact platform is one of the most effective and science-backed ways to improve mobility because it delivers precise, low magnitude vibrations through the soles of the feet that improve circulation and help maintain stability. There's no sweating, there's no strain. You literally just stand on it for 10 minutes a day. I speak to the Juvent CEO, Rush Simonson, in episode 114, and I learned that his own mother, who was in her 90s, went from bedbound to fully mobile with this simple daily routine. So if you want to be sure that somebody that you love stays healthy and independent, go to juvent.com/Kelly Brogan and use the code Kelly300 for $300 off at checkout. You can bring this incredible science-backed tool into their lives. And I think it's one of the most thoughtful and powerful investments that you can make in their well-being. So again, it's juvent.com/Kelly Brogan, and the code is Kelly300. I mean, it's extraordinary how easily conceived as savage, like a clitorectomy is, right? Like, oh, well, that's just those weird people on other continents doing absolutely horrific shit. And the fact that this ritualized medical rape, abuse, and torture is occurring on a daily basis. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, even on a psych ward, sometimes I imagine if people actually knew like electroconvulsive therapy is going on a daily basis, or so many aspects of the gynecologic rituals. I mean, it's just when you take the lens of blind acceptance off and you see it for what it is, two strangers interacting in this way, it's horrifying. But I'm not sure there's anything that it is more truly alarming than this practice. So you've talked about some of the implications, repercussions, and downstream, effects for men, which again, if you imagine, ritualized clitorectomy, I think it's not that difficult for women to be like, my life would be quite different if the head of this very deep and profound, sensory space in my body was mutilated. I think we would have some. However, I've also heard you talk about the greater implications of circumcision, socially, financially, right? Meaning on like the bigger macro scale. And even sexually for women. I mean, some of which might be obvious, but some of which are not, right? Like how might sex be different even for a woman, right? So I'd love to even like sort of zoom out a bit before we go into, I want to go into like a client profile of yours and sort of like what this man looks like who's interested in doing this work. But before we do that, I want to just really take inventory of how far reaching the effects are of this practice.
Yeah, let's start with sex. For when a man has a foreskin, when a man is intact, the foreskin, when he penetrates and enters a woman's vagina, the foreskin will lightly pull back and create a plug outside of her vagina that will actually keep excitation, lubrication inside of the vagina. So not only is his foreskin creating his own lubrication on his end, when he penetrates, there's a plug and it is keeping moisture inside. Otherwise, it would be the glands of the penis, the head, right? The umbrella bottom portion is pulling lubrication in and out of the vagina. So one, women are already going through their own lubrication difficulties based upon their own trauma and their own sexual energy. So we have all the weight has been put on us, unless we're getting lubricant, right? Is being put on us to create the lubrication to be sure that this is a pleasant, moist, fun experience. So when there is a foreskin, he is also able to, again, I said the proprioception, and he moves more subtly, and he is able to move in a different type of dynamic that is more supportive to the function and the anatomy inside the architecture of the vagina. If he does not have a foreskin, traction, really hard hitting, I mean, he's unable to feel. We have removed, let's say, 20,000 all the way to 100,000 nerve endings. So friction becomes a big part of the way that he is going to start to have sex with you, because over time, the glands of the penis will keratinize, meaning think about a callus. Because it is so sensitive, it needs a foreskin protective barrier. He has to create all of this friction so that he can feel, because the keratinization is a preventative. He begins to numb out. I have men tell me that they feel as if, imagine having sex with a kitchen glove on. So if a woman is constantly experiencing this abrupt friction penetration, then it can also create scar tissuing inside her vaginal wall. And the experience can also create a lot of soreness and discomfort. So it's not the smooth, it's not the lubricated and the sensual type of experience in which it should be. Then we have erectile dysfunction. And erectile dysfunction is largely caused due to the keratinization of the glands. And because he can't really feel anymore. So his ability to get excited goes down. And then men always get in their head, and then he gets in his head. So it makes it even more challenging, because think of this shock and trauma has been lodged in his root chakra. So over time, that will start to weaken. And then we have premature ejaculation. And this is his way of bailing out of sex early, because it is unsafe for him to deeply connect and be this vulnerable with a woman, because the first time that he was ever vulnerable in his life, he was attacked. So the hyper excitation, the hyper arousal is actually his body way of protecting him and getting him out of the situation as soon as possible. I mean, even in the Jewish medieval times, there was a man named Maimonides who had a huge part or role into the implementation of circumcision and actually being sure that they were cutting more skin than they actually used to. And they knew that it would completely put a wedge between the marital bed and have him expel very quickly, ejaculate very quickly, leaving her frustrated and incredibly aroused. So over time, she's not going to want to have sex with him anymore because the rug is constantly being pulled from underneath her. And then you have the layer of trust. How can you trust a man who can't really take his time and be there with you? Sex has become an act, and it has become a peak orgasmic experience. And that's it. You ejaculate and you're done. It is no longer the beautiful, the sacred union of developing the arrows between one another. And to me, that is extremely devastating, and how it can rupture relationships. And so the emotional and sexual component of deeply connecting with a man, it's no longer there unless he is willing to truly step in and do the work that he needs to access more longevity in the bedroom. But usually this is going to be an area in which he needs to deeply look at and resolve. And then we have the financial component, the money that is being made on these babies' backs, and how it is a $6 billion industry because of the fibroblasts inside of the foreskin. The beauty industry is one of the biggest buyers of foreskin. You can actually go online right now and buy a vial of foreskin for about $1,000. It comes in almost in like, just like a little baby vial. What would you call that, Kelly? When you you put a needle in and extract it. Like, it's just something like that you can get.
Like a syringe. Yeah.
Exactly. They're putting it into beauty products. We have the Hollywood cults are promoting the penis facials, and it's hiding in creams. And Oprah has a specific cream that has fibroblasts from babies from Korea in it. We have all the money that the hospitals are making from these sales, and then the burn units. They're using the skin to help burn victims, the circumstance, the tools, the anesthetics. And then we have the cosmetic portion of this, because there's a huge percentage of these circumcisions that actually go wrong. So if they're going wrong, they're going to need to go back in. So the cosmetic reasons for, repurposing or fixing whatever it is that has happened. So like bot circumcisions are really common. What happens is they take so much skin that the ligaments inside of the penis that help connect to it can be more of an external organ. They loosen and they will kind of clamp back in. So infants are coming in with any belly buttons in their penises. And they call it buried penis, but it's actually a botch because of how much skin they've taken. And that actually takes some time. And some parents get so concerned that they'll have to take them in for another reset. So, and then who are these men turning into? What type of unworthiness is going on in their system? They are distrusting of almost anything. Their ability to be an effective leader has been turned off because of all the other areas of his actual energetic system that has also been circumcised. So he's going to therapy. He's taking antidepressants. He is we got a lot of all the drugs that the pharmaceuticals are selling to these boys. So it's everywhere. I mean, you could even put the alcohol industry into this as well. And then you could even I was on a call with someone recently, and she was talking about fraternity culture. And a lot of these cut men are all, guess what? Victims of that type of ritualistic behavior, because they are wanting to find ways to feel like they belong. Because the loss of a foreskin, it creates an incompleteness. And they have to seek out a lot more energy to feel whole and to feel as if like they belong, because clearly they don't belong in their family unit because their mother and their father attacked them. So it just cycles up until this man actually, and then, a sexual wellness, lubrication, it really doesn't stop.
So obviously I wouldn't be talking to you if you weren't a part of the solution, right? Because this is a lot. It's a lot to take in. So who is the man who comes to you, right? Like, what is his chief complaint, if we want to call it that in medical terminology? And how is it that amidst the layers of programming, conditioning, trauma, intergenerational, lineage level stuff, how is it that he's identified that this is where he wants to start to reclaim? So who is this man who's coming to you, and how is it that you could possibly help him? Right? So what is it that you do for him?
Great question. Gosh, he is alone, isolated. He has known there has always been something wrong about his circumcision and never had anybody to talk to about it, and has a difficult time trusting his parents, or he has a current bad relationship with his mother. He feels unworthy. The relationships that he is calling into his life are of women that are equally unhealed, unable to hold space for him, unable to actually see him in his pain, and to not trivial. They all trivialize them and laugh at them because this is something that is totally fine. They've always loved a circumcised penis, and that they're crazy for even having this problem to begin with. They don't understand why they can't ground in their ideas. They can't see this big picture of their purpose and of who they are. And there is a deep insecurity wound because of the unworthiness and the ability to not judge oneself, because he's like, I don't understand. I'm doing all these things. I'm meditating. I am going to programs. But like, I feel like I get all of a sudden the light comes through, and I feel like I change, but I just go right back. It's because it just keeps taking them due to the severe trauma that had happened to them, not only on a physical and psychological layer, but on the spiritual and psychic layer. You know, if any of us were to experience a trauma to the body, a cut, right? We would all actually have the same response and know that that is something that we're going to have to heal. So physically, we all know that a cut to the body, specifically something as deep as this, can have a really big impact on him, and it will be an area that he needs to heal. But then we have the psychological portion of this as well is, okay, this traumatic event happens to us. Let's say, for example, a dad walks out on a little girl, right? She is going to, that's a traumatic experience. But when it becomes toxic, when it actually becomes a problem mentally, is when we create archetypes and toxic identities about who we are. For example, she could say, my dad left me, therefore I'm unlovable. My dad left me, therefore I am unworthy of love. I am not good enough. Right? So even psychically, if we were to take that to another level, when trauma comes into any one of us, we can have so much congestion that it prevents us from tapping into intuition. It prevents us from really understanding the level of those divine hits that come in, because that's where the healing happens. I mean, you know, you just worked with Joe Dispenza. We can talk about Bruce Lipton. We can talk about David Hawkins. It's all about removing the ego and removing everything in the body so that we can have the superconscious, we can have the infinite creator in which what we are. So I'm leading into essentially what the program does. We are bowing down to science. We need data to prove that this thing works. We need all this evidence because we have forgotten who we are. Ultimately, throughout this entire beautiful Earth School, wherever we are, we were spirit before our body. Our body is going to die. We will take our last exhale. Our spirit will continue. And it was in the spiritual that we actually harness our deep level of power. You know, think even about Ayurveda, plant medicine, herbs, Chinese traditional medicine, or traditional Chinese medicine. They were all intuited. So essentially what I do and work is I help men remove all the trauma and the toxic energies in their body, and helping them unlock their ability to psychically heal, because the body has this somatic response to trauma. It will limit his life, and it is my job to teach techniques that will help unleash this divine ability that we all have in the remembrance of who we are and the remembrance that we are spirit first and foremost, and how to pull it into the body so the body can heal it.
I mean, if there ever were a situation that could lead to helplessness, a sense of powerlessness and hopelessness, it would be the removal of an irreplaceable body part, right? So I really appreciate deeply that you see this as the beginning of a reclamation path, which of course it is, even in this terrain. So I am very grateful that you are doing this work out there, that you're supporting men and their women and children and the greater collective in this way. And it's my sincere hope and desire that more women begin gatekeeping around this, because they've been awakened to the reality, just the objective reality of what it is that we are complicit in. And you are a huge part of that. So I want to thank you, Jenna. We'll make sure to put in show notes how people can get in touch with you and begin this journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, for interviewing me, and for everyone else listening. I appreciate it.